Welcome, everyone. My name is Frida Nixdorf, and I'm joining today from the foothills of the Sierra Nevada in Northern California, which is the unceded ancestral homelands of the Nisenan people. I'm a staff weaver for the Work That Reconnects network, where we've been offering this webinars program for the past 4 years. So thank you for joining us for the Webinars and Conversation Cafe program, where we are providing a wide range of rich educational and supportive online events for our global Work That Reconnects community. Our intention is to strengthen the web of the community while reaching beyond its current edges to weave deeper connections with others who are contributing to the great turning in diverse and complementary ways.
So welcome, everyone. My name is Shah Malloy, and I represent the Work That Reconnects network as a volunteer on the webinar team. And I'm here on the unceded lands of the Litarame Runa people in Lutruwita, also known as 4 Mile Creek in Tasmania, Australia. And this land is in the shadows of a pyramid-shaped hill called Lemira Jananawugalina, or the molar tooth, and was likely a distinctive landmark for the First Nations people when migrating from rivers and the mountains to the coast. And I pay my deep respects to elders past and present and express my deepest gratitude for the care of this beautiful and abundant country. And I invite you all to acknowledge the country you are within in the chat and share anything you know about the First Nations people of the land you are in. I also invite us to pause, be aware of our breath, and take this moment to connect with our own ancestors and the future beings for whom we are their ancestors. And in our webinar today, we will travel together through the spiral of the Work That Reconnects. Firstly, grounding and being present within gratitude. We then move to honouring our pain in the world in ritual together. We move to seeing with new and ancient eyes. And we go forth into actions that call us. And then we'll find ourselves connecting with gratitude again, and possibly in a new and deeper way after sharing this time together. So in this first stage of gratitude, I invite you all to put into the chat something that you love and are grateful for. And in today's webinar, it's my pleasure to introduce John and Pat. And so John Seed and Pat Fleming are co-authors, along with Joanna Macy and Arne Naess, of Thinking Like a Mountain Towards a Council of All Beings. And they'll reflect together on 40 years of deep ecology and its origins and development, its worldwide reach, and on where the current inquiry and edges are now. And we are blessed as this webinar will include video of Pat and John's recent conversation with Joanna Macy, as well as archival footage of the 4th author of the book, Thinking Like a Mountain, the Norwegian eco-philosopher and founder of deep ecology movement, Arne Naess. So John Seed is a founder of the Rainforest Information Centre, and since 1979, he's been involved in the direct actions which have resulted in the protection of Australian rainforests. John has written and lectured extensively on deep ecology and has been conducting Council of All Beings and other deep ecology workshops around the world for 35 years. And that's just a tiny little bit of who John is. And Pat Fleming grew up in England with Irish roots and has Australian nationality from her time working in mental health services in Sydney in the 1980s. She recently moved with her partner to northern Lutruwita, Tasmania, lucky us in Lutruwita, and an island of much wild beauty below the southeast coast of mainland Australia. And since meeting and training with Joanna Macy in the early 1980s, she's worked in many countries facilitating deep ecology work and the work that Reconnects workshops. And it's my absolute pleasure and delight to hand over to John and Pat.
Well, thanks a lot, Shah. So wonderful to be here. So I'm going to start talking about the origins of deep ecology for me. And deep ecology for me grew out of my forest activism. Back in 1979, I was living in northern New South Wales in Australia, and somehow found myself involved in what years later we realised was the first direct action in defence of rainforests, not only in Australia but anywhere in the world. And the time was clearly ripe. Those actions were tremendously successful. Just 2 years later and 200 arrests, an opinion poll found that over 70% of the people of New South Wales wanted an end to rainforest logging, and a string of national parks were created. The following year, many of us went to Tasmania for the largest such action in Australian history in the southwest of Tasmania. And once again, we found ourselves with a new national park. And then in 1985-86, we went up to far north Queensland for the tropical rainforests. And I'd like to show a few minutes of video from that time, which will give you a sense of the kind of actions that we were involved with then, because we rang the Cairns media asking them to come up, and they said, call us when there's some blood. And so we didn't want any blood, and so we had to devise some actions which would be as interesting as blood, and that's what I'm going to show you from the film that I produced at that time called Earth First.
The call, the screaming of what I felt was the forest screaming for help, trying to drown it out, but I couldn't. I kept hearing it because it was inside. And I finally found myself running towards where the chainsawing and bulldozing was going on. I don't remember leaving the mower. I just must have jumped off and started running up the road. And someone grabbed me and calmed me down. I was going to take them on barehanded.
It was obvious desperate action was required, and they dug in the best Anzac tradition in order to buy time. Time for the annual rains to come and halt work on the road. Time for the weight of public opinion to support the federal government against the state government and stop the road as they had stopped the Franklin Dam. And time to present their case through the media to the people of Australia.
It's the only place where the rainforest goes right from the mountains down to the reef in this particular ecological system. It's the only place in Australia. It's one of the few places in the world. Biologically, it's a genetic storehouse. It's just very, very destructive to put the road through here.
We've been getting the holes every morning, ready for what's about to happen in the next hour or so. Just waiting patiently.
Are you feeling frightened or?
A little bit, not too much, but I know everything's going to be all right. I know it's plenty of friends are around, so fine, yeah. It's just fine.
It's all time on our side, you know. We really just need time until the federal government will step in and stop this, at least, you know, for a little while, so that it can be looked at properly and everyone will realise that it's just a ridiculous proposal.
Cindy, you're not only buried in the hole, you're chained to a block of concrete down there.
Yeah, that's right.
It can't be comfortable.
Oh, it's not too bad.
Come to far north Queensland, where they're ripping off the reef, chopping all the forest down and selling it, good grief. But we have fun in the sun, is better than none. We got to keep a step ahead of them until this race is run. My brother, keep a step ahead of them until this race is run. Yeah, we have fun in the sun, life on the run. The whole damn state is chasing me, and I think it's just begun. But we have fun in the sun, it's better than none. We got to keep a step ahead of them until this race is run. My brother, keep a step ahead of them until this game is won. Oh, my sister, keep a step ahead of them until this race is run.
Keep an eye on him. This is going to be a very dangerous operation. There's strong likelihood that people could be killed.
Feeling frightened?
It's all time on our side. Everyone will realise that it's just so ridiculous.
Sydney's one of them as well. It's taking now 4 police to carry her out of the way. And Michael's just been arrested from the holes as well. They've just got him out. He was the last person that had the galvanised iron used in front of him with the backhoe.
So without any blood, those images flashed around Australia and flashed around the world, and were part of what ended up protecting that forest in a national park. But during that first half of the 1980s, worldwide, for every forest that was protected, 1,000 forests were lost. And it became clear that there was no way to save the planet one forest at a time, that unless we could address the underlying psychological or spiritual disease that allows modern humans to imagine that we can profit from the destruction of our own life support systems, clearly these actions would be of no particular significance as far as the future of the world was concerned. And so it was with great relief that I happened upon the philosophy of deep ecology, where for the first time I could see a way forward to address this underlying psychological problem. And the term was coined by the late Arne Naess, the professor of philosophy from Oslo University. And according to him, underlying all of the symptoms of the environmental crisis was the illusion of separation between human beings and the rest of the natural world. And I was led to Arne Naess and to many of the things that I discovered by the American poet Gary Schneider, who was in Australia visiting us at that time. And I'll hand over to Pat.
Wow, that was powerful to see the images from the rainforest, John. And I know that you and I have stood up in that forest, and I found myself, this is the Daintree forest, feeling like I had really come home. It was like a primal home. And so destroying our primal home for the sake of a few four-wheel drives getting up north is criminal. So I'll just briefly speak about how John and I and Joanna and others all melded ourselves into some of what's become deep ecology work, and the deep ecology movement and various other relationships that deep ecology has spread into. I grew up in the 1960s, 50s and 60s, which was the nuclear age. And my father worked on nuclear submarines. I was very aware of the policies between America and Russia for nuclear destruction, mutually assured destruction. And I didn't think I was going to make 21. I just didn't see a future. And so I think for a lot of us, we were growing up with so much opportunity, but so much grief. And I didn't know what to do with that. I worked in mental health for 5 years, and I worked with a lot of other people's grief, isolation, breakdown. And I loved working in groups. And that was where I found my strength, and I found the wisdom of the group would come forward. And I think there's no, that is so true for us in deep ecology. We don't work on our own, we work in groups. I ended up at coming up to Bodie Farm, which John was a co-founder of in northern New South Wales in 1979, just as the Terania Creek blockade, which was very similar to what you saw in the Daintree blockade, was coming to a point where the foresters had pulled out. And I was lucky enough to just come in and hear and be part of a group that was just putting their body on the line, basically. That was the beginning. I met John and I went home to England. In England, the mutually assured destruction was in full swing, with the Americans having multi-headed nuclear warhead missiles based in a place called Greenham Common, a camp. And this was quite a catalyst of women saying no. And I was part of, briefly, 30,000 women circling that base, holding hands right round the 14 kilometres of the base wire. And Joanna went there as well. It was such a cauldron of standing up and resistance. And Joanna came to the UK in 1983. She'd written her first pamphlet before she wrote Despair and Empowerment in the Nuclear Age. And she was calling it Despair Work. So John had come across this pamphlet, I'd come across this pamphlet, and it changed my life. And I became determined to work with her and find out more. So I was lucky enough to do intensive work with her. The next year, I returned to Australia, and I didn't quite know why I was returning, but as soon as I returned, I was met with people here who had also got hold of Joanna's first book, Despair and Empowerment in the Nuclear Age. And because I've done the training with Joanna, we hooked up and we started, I started doing workshops and talks and introductions. And very quickly, a little gang formed, a wonderful gang of people, including Bobby Allen, who at that point had invited Joanna out to Australia to come and have a tour. And this was just the beginning of this work coming over. In 1985, very early on, Joanna turned up at Sydney Airport, and we had a month long of going around every single major city in Australia, doing talks, workshops, press conferences, all sorts. We had rock stars coming, we had politicians. It was a very dynamic time. And John and Joanna came together like a pair of chemicals that would suddenly kind of boomph into something new. And John and Joanna were up in Terania Creek, where the initial blockade had been, that some of you were on, I know that. And we were coming to the end of the trip of Joanna in Australia, and we had an intensive 3-day workshop in Sydney. John had been holding this notion of all beings speaking for other beings, and he and Joanna came together with a sense of how could we express ourselves for non-human forms, for the earth to be able to have voices, non-human voices. So we set up the first Council of All Beings in, it was February 1985, and there was about 45 people, and it was, again, transforming. There was a sense that we weren't on our own. We, as a group, were being supported by the whole of the earth and beyond. So that was really something that kicked off Council of All Beings, and I've got a couple of slides here. Very briefly, I'll show you. This is at Schumacher College, which is where deep ecology really took off in England, and they've run many courses since 1991. And I was teaching on a course there called Call of the Wild. And this was all people who were environmental educators, people working with kids, people working with adults, working across all sorts of organisations who wanted to take the voice of the wild back into their work. You'll see that this is the Council of All Beings as it evolved. And each council has its own power, has its own feeling. This is in Portugal, up in the mountains, where people are setting up eco-villages. And usually in a council of all beings, we ask the humans not to have a voice or not to be there. But in the bottom right, can you see someone with a white mask on? That's a young man. He's probably only about 17. And he said he wanted to be a child because he felt that the children had no voices either. So he came to the council as a child. So they're incredibly powerful chances for people to encounter their more than humanness and to share that. And it's not only the different aspects that we might well think of as the grief or the anger or the outrage at their habitats being killed and destroyed and their kind being killed. But there's also a wisdom that arises, and it's a communal wisdom that seems to come through from all beings and from the earth itself. So that was something that we started in 1985, John, and that's still going and has gone around the world in many, many forms. In 1987, this is a little bit of historic kind of storytelling. John and I both found ourselves in San Francisco. There was a conference of Interhelp. Now, Interhelp was set up through all the people who've been doing despair and empowerment work. So this is before the work that Reconnects. And there were about 200 Interhelpers having a conference in San Francisco. And I presented on deep ecology there. John, we're not sure where we were, but we were all there. We know we were there. And Joanna had been invited to write another book about this work. And John and Joanna had got quite a structure of chapters in it. And Joanna was just going to Tibet to go, she was not allowed to go to Tibet, but she was going to Tibet. She needed someone to write a bit more on this work, and she asked me if I'd do that. So that's how I came in. And the last thing I'll say is that we were sitting in a car park. Don't ask me why it was a car park, but it was after the conference, meeting the Alberts, who were the publishers from New Society Publishers, sitting there going, what are we going to call it? What are we going to call it? And Aldo Leopold's wonderful quote, and go back to Sand County Almanac if you want to read the whole story, of that we need to be able to think like an ecosystem, or to survive in this planet, we need to get out of our own little heads, and thinking like a mountain is a symbol of thinking like an ecosystem. So the book was born in a car park, and I'll tell you more about that after the... We're having a brief, well, actually it's 20 minutes of Joanna and John and I talking. So fast forwarding to 2023, Joanna's 94 in this, and she and John and I had a conversation, and it was just a catch up. We weren't scripted, we weren't really sure what we were going to talk about or what would happen. So
these years, like what, let's say the last 2 decades, I have been really noticing that my sense of wonder and gratitude are just huge. And that being, yeah, I think the best word for it is gratitude. So, so glad to be alive, and so amazed at the generosity of life itself. It's very hard for me to think of just the last week when an extremely close friend of mine who died, tribute to him as being organized. They wanted me to say something. That words are coming very hard for me. Often I think that I should keep you with me, but maybe I should have a little picture of you there, because I'm not finding it difficult to talk right now. Maybe I should. Pat and John, right there,
in your pocket.
One of my reflections about the human condition is that all of us either die young or we die a bit at a time. And it's too late to die young. And so watching the bits dying one after the other and wondering what's going to come next.
The other thing that I find is that even a conversation with the two of you, I will remember, I'll find things that I wouldn't on my own. And the language and the facility to go deeper into inquiry or whatever depends on the people, and that sense of the embedded self in each of us, in all of us rather, creates something that on my own I don't always have access to. Be that, that group self, whatever you want to call it.
There's quite famous therapists and psychologists, he's very highly regarded, has seriously proposed, and he has a book, I'll show you the book, a new pronoun, muy, which means me and we, but there's a we inside of us.
No, I get that completely. It's back to Descartes and chopping us all up into I, you, me.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed in my workshops of late, Joanna, I mean, it's been creeping up on me all along, but I've noticed that the sense of amazing intimacy that everybody shares every single time, by the time you get to the last sharing circle on Sunday afternoon, when someone will say, I have to go to work tomorrow in this office building without any windows. Can't we all just get married and go on from here together? Like people feel that after less than 48 hours together. And when I look at what the outcomes of the workshops are, the promise on the flyer is about ecological identity and experiencing a deeper connection with the earth. And those things certainly happen, but far more visible and far more dramatic is the change in relationships with the other people with whom we've just shared these processes. And I've started asking people to, while it's still alive for them, because it's so ineffable, it's as ineffable as a psychedelic. It's so hard to remember what that feeling is like. But in a way, when I think about ecological identity, instead of just thinking about our relationships with the non-human world, I realise that as a social species, the first link in our ecological identity is the circle of people around us, is like our people, is part of our ecological identity. And that's kind of, I don't know where to go with that exactly, but that's what's been growing in me, is the sense that this may be the most important piece in an age when artificial intelligence and other things are making it very difficult to trust anything that we see on the screen, or anything, the disinformation that's going on and so on, and that it becomes more and more important to actually be able to trust other living human beings standing in front of us.
Wow, you are articulating what makes me want to keep on living at 94. I just saw, it's a cartoon of the universe. And the universe is sort of under the water and holding up her hands over the water, but you just see the fingers. And the universe is trying to get through to these fingertips that think they're separate individuals.
Wow.
It's so adorable. Because the universe is under the water and it's just holding up these like this, and they think they're separate. And that's been true of the work that Reconnects or deep ecology work from the get-go. And whether we're conveying the laughter of discovery or the grief, sharing the grief and tears, it's all this one escape hatch from the terrified, separate, bloated little ego. Maybe that's our best contribution.
I just keep coming back to the fact that we're embedded ourselves. All our different selves are like that nested hierarchy of embedding, so that, you know, that we can, if we're not careful, we can cut off the sense of being part of that other nest. I think humor is just such a good way to kind of convey that, you know, not philosophical discourse, but people will get it.
I'm just getting the picture from that metaphor that you told us, that cartoon, Joanna, that maybe you could then say that the experience of the workshop is like either watching the hand emerge from the water so that the four fingers see that connectedness, not as a theory, but actually there it is in front of us, or perhaps even better, that the water is receding, that whatever it is that's been drowning our ability to recognise this, and the fact that it's always been like this. It's not that this is something new, this is just how things are, but because of the existence of this water, whatever that is, we're unable to recognise it.
I'm worried about how scary or what the future will bring in terms of fear, because fear is the thing that makes us lose sight of our commonality. And I sort of have an ache for developing in the work, you know, it can't happen through me now, but to simply work together. Maybe it's my time in Sri Lanka that saw how powerful it was. Sarvodaya, all awakening together, that's what it means. And how they did that. What impressed me about this movement was that they went into a village and got people to physically work together or build something. You know, when somebody holding on to the planks you're trying to saw apart, or just anything that where you're even building a bookcase or cooking up a meal to share with people. Just the need for that, because I think the times of fear will continue, if not grow more scary.
In the conversation, both in Britain and here, you know, come from Britain to here, is about building resilient community. How do we anticipate that things are going to continue falling apart, and, you know, will the pumps run dry and the cars stop running, or well, yeah, we don't know how it's going to be, but that anticipating that things will change and that our normal is not going to be the normal in 10, 20 years. And very much for me, you know, landing here, the place that I've really connected deeply with some wonderful people in Tasmania is through permaculture, and there's a permaculture centre that's called Reseed. There's a woman there who runs Active Hope every Sunday online. They've done quite a bit of the work that Reconnects. And there's a lot of working together for food and for kids and films and culture. And it's just a little centre. There's maybe, you know, I don't know, 10 people running it, but they're within the permaculture movement in Australia, which is where it started. In fact, it started just down the road from me. Bill Mollison comes from Burnie, which is just, you know, 30 miles away. The permaculture network is very embedded in the land and in people creating their own communities, their own gardens, their own community gardens, their own food sharing systems. And that is a natural kind of part of this work, in a way. It kind of grounds it into what you're talking about. And there's a lot of people studying, you know, they're very much an educational system. In Morag, who's hosted John and I really well and is supporting John and I, you know, they are constantly running online courses and physical courses. So, you know, it's just looking at who are the parts of this bigger body that's going to be the resilient community. And that's local. That's got to be local, you know?
You know, I just want to say something more about this before. See, I really think that things are going to get a lot harder. And that the terror, the need, the suffering, the anguish, the sense of loss, which will happen as what we call climate change, but it's not a big enough word. We can prepare, you know, or we can get used to seeing each other as treasures of connection. We can get used to being inventive about how we even see another human. The great danger is, of course, that we'll compete and that we'll take our disappointment and anguish and hunger and hurt out on each other. But right now, things are a little, we have a little time. Aren't there ways that we can stock up on and brush off and see what we treasure so that we can, and even rehearse, and even find, and even fall in, there are more occasions to fall in love with each other. You know, just working together, carrying seeds and water onto dry land or whatever, to rehearse somehow what are the ways we want to be together when things get hard. I want that kind of conversation, and I'm so far not really finding it here. Maybe the people that come to, you know, I've always had a dark streak of seeing, maybe it comes from the nuclear work, that how close we are to Armageddon and also to burning ourselves up like that. And we're so, we're still so dumb.
That's so beautiful, Joanna, and so important. Thank you.
That's right. It's taking it seriously. See, we've been, some people say we feel good together. Well, feel good, schmeal good, it doesn't matter. We have life in our hands. It can go out. We have instruments that we can obliterate life on this planet if we're scared enough and stupid enough. And this is very precious time. And we have some tools.
I'm in suspended disbelief that it's going to happen.
What's going to happen?
Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But what's, the great unraveling?
Yeah.
Well, that is happening. But what about the great turning, which is a great turning toward each other?
Living in a time like this, there are really two things that I need to be doing. And one of them is, given that after 4,000 million years, I may be the last moment in this amazing saga, I have to devote at least half of my time to celebrating and thanking and just remembering what an amazing trip it's been, 4,000 million years. And so it's possible that this is goodbye, and making the best of this goodbye that I possibly can. And on the other hand, it may not be goodbye. 4,000 million years, we faced many challenges. And so maybe we're going to come up with what it takes to get through this one. And so then the other half of the time has to be spent working on that, which I think is what, what you've been saying just now, Joanna, is the root of that work, is that we have to do this together. We have to find each other, and Sarvodaya, all awakening together.
I think it's like childbirth. What is going to what needs to happen is as big as having a baby. We're going to come together and generate something, and we can be realistic enough to go beyond what we think is possible. Because otherwise we're just duds, wiping our tears in our noses while we feel good together when actually we're on a gangplank.
I just see that when we do get together, and the deeper we go together, and the higher we can sing and celebrate together, the more emergent properties that we don't know, we don't have any idea about, the things we haven't thought about or we haven't understood, we're energizing that together. And it's kind of somehow like catching some of those and bringing them into form and naming them and sharing that process to keep making it and to see where it goes. And to me, that's what gives me a sense of kind of jumping up and going, hey, you know, I'm alive, what's emerging, what's next? And you know, we might all be on a gangplank together, but hey, let's jump up and down and see what we can cook up.
Precisely. Yeah, that's no, this is not to be seen.
Turn right and then
as
immediately
medicine,
turn.
but it's turning toward each other with, I don't know, that itself would be interesting. The terror of our situation, that we are a species on this planet which is suffering these huge dislocations around breathable air and enough water, et cetera, and we're so busy we're still so busy preparing our weapons to destroy, that can destroy life in a blink. If we could feel a quality of determination. And now I feel a lot of a determination because I'm going to die soon. Well, maybe I felt the same when I had a lot of time.
Wow, you know, how do we grow and clarify our quality of determination? How do we look after that?
That's right. I like that. I like that word, determination. And to actually see how flimsy are our chances, given who we are and what we're doing and what's happening to the planet. If we could just see not only that this is chance, but also that it's right there within us. If we could look at each other with what?
So, how beautiful, Joanna. Arne Naess said that ecological ideas won't save us. What we need is ecological identity, ecological self. And in order to nourish that ecological identity, he called for community therapies to heal that illusion of separation. And that's what Joanna brought to the philosophy of deep ecology, was the actual spiritual technologies that she had developed. And the Council of All Beings was the first of many experiential processes that were developed by Joanna and Pat and I. And to honour the late Arne Naess, the fourth author of our volume, Thinking Like a Mountain Towards the Council of All Beings, which has now been translated into many languages, not long ago translated into Mandarin. I'd like to have a short clip of Arne.
So deep ecology movement are asked to stand up and bang, shake people like this and say, what are you doing? Well, How do you justify that? So the deep ecology movement have, in the sense of Gandhi, of course, what he calls constructive program. If we want to change anything in society, live with those who are opponents. If you do anything with crime, live with the criminals, and so on. Participate in the direct action, but do it in a way that is understandable to the opposition. And constructive program says that if it's something that takes a long time, you should arrange things such that you can be of help to the opponents, not just standing somewhere, but being able to say, can we do something? What's your point? And so on. And otherwise it gets too abstract. That's important. But 21st century, the next 10 or 20 years, I think even economical, the new economics, the green economy will not be able to really change few things economically, and poverty, abject poverty, going bad. Ecosystems, atmosphere, and everything getting worse. I think so, in the beginning of the 22nd. And all governments so far, they speak about using more energy. So the term development will be very soon, I think, a negative term. So in the next 50 years, all plans are bad, more or less bad. It's only a question of more or less bad. So it's only the last half of the next century really things can go maybe better, but still increasing in sustainability. It's going to be worse and worse next century, but what do you do now is important. It depends on you, what you do now, today, this week, this month. If you do not behave as you should now, we get still further down in next century.
So one of the elements of the book Thinking Like a Mountain was a piece that Joanna and I wrote called Gaia Meditations, and Shah and I are going to read that now. What are you? What am I? Intersecting cycles of water, earth, air, and fire. That's what I am. That's what you are.
Water, blood, lymph, mucus, sweat, tears, inner oceans tugged by the moon, tides within and tides without, streaming fluids floating our cells, washing and nourishing through endless riverways of gut and vein and capillary, moisture pouring in and through and out of you, of me, in the vast poem of the hydrological cycle. You are that, I am that.
Earth, matter made from rock and soil. It too is pulled by the moon as the magma circulates through the planet heart and roots suck molecules into biology. Earth pours through us, replacing each cell in the body every 7 years. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, we ingest, incorporate, and excrete the earth, are made from earth. I am that. You are that.
Air, the gaseous realm, the atmosphere, the planet's membrane, the inhale and the exhale, breathing out carbon dioxide to the trees and breathing in their fresh exudations. Oxygen kissing each cell awake, atoms dancing in orderly metabolism, interpenetrating. That dance of the air cycle, breathing the universe in and out again, is what you are, is what I am.
Fire. Fire from our sun that fuels all life, drawing up plants and raising the waters to the sky to fall again replenishing. The inner furnace of your metabolism burns with the fire of the Big Bang that first sent matter energy spinning through space and time. And the same fire as the lightning that flashed into the primordial soup, catalysing the birth of organic life. You were there. I was there. For each cell of our bodies is descended in an unbroken chain from that event. Through the desire of atom for molecule, of molecule for cell, of cell for organism. In that spawning of forms, death was born simultaneously with sex, before we divided from the plant realm. So, in our sexuality, we can feel ancient stirrings that connect us with plant as well as animal life. We come from them in an unbroken chain, through fish learning to walk the land, feeling scales turning to wings, through the migrations in the ages of ice.
We have, but recently, come into human form. If Earth's whole history was compressed into 24 hours, beginning at midnight, organic life would begin at only 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Mammals emerge at 11:30 in the night, and from amongst them only at seconds to midnight, our species. In our long planetary journey, we've taken far more ancient forms than these we now wear. Some of these forms we remember in our mother's womb, wearing vestigial tails and gills, growing fins for hands. Countless times in that journey we died to old forms, let go of old ways, allowing new ones to emerge. But nothing is ever lost. Though forms pass, all returns. Each worn-out cell consumed, recycled through mosses, leeches, birds of prey. Think to your next death. Will your flesh and bones back into the cycle? Surrender, love the plump worms you will become. Launder your weary being through the fountain of life.
Beholding you, I behold as well all the different creatures that compose you. The mitochondria in the cells, the intestinal bacteria, the life teeming on the surface of the skin, the great symbiosis that is you, the incredible coordination and cooperation of countless beings. You are that too, just as your body is part of a much larger symbiosis, living in wider reciprocities. Be conscious of that give and take when you move among trees. Breathe your pure carbon dioxide to a leaf. Sense it breathing fresh oxygen back to you. Countless times in that journey, we died to old forms, let go of old ways, allowing new ones to emerge. But nothing is ever lost. Though forms pass, all returns. Remember again and again the old cycles of partnership. Draw on them in this time of trouble. By your very nature and the journey you have made, there is in you deep knowledge of belonging. Draw on it now in this time of fear. You have earth-bred wisdom of your interexistence with all that is. Take courage and power in it now, that we may help each other awaken in this time of peril.
Beautiful, John, thank you. Lovely to hear you reading it. I invite everybody just to take a moment to just sit back, feel into your body, feel your feet on the ground connecting with the earth, sitting wherever you're sitting in place, and take a breath right through the whole of your body, touching with oxygen any cells, any parts that have come through this amazing cycle and recycle of life and that keeps us alive. Just breathing into that for a moment before we go into the next exercise. How amazing the oxygen we've just taken in was probably put out by the grass outside, or the leaves, or the bushes, or the trees. Taking a little bit of green plant life in every time we breathe. So we're going to move now into an exercise that is very often in deep ecology work, it's in work that reconnects workshops, and it can stand alone. I found it quite powerful if we're not doing a lot of other things to just use the cairn of mourning as a way of being a circle of people together and looking at what we've lost and the impacts and the feelings we have about that. John, can you just briefly say where that exercise came from? Because I think you found it, some time ago.
Right from the beginning, honouring our pain for the world has been part of this work. But it was in the late 1980s in Santa Fe, New Mexico, doing a weekend of deep ecology that the organiser of that workshop, Stella Reed, a poet who still lives in that part of the world, introduced me to the cairn of mourning.
And it's part of what we can consider such an important part of staying alive and staying connected and vital in a world at times that can throw really hard stuff at us, stuff that we grieve or we mourn the loss of. And so we can give ourselves a little time to reflect and to feel into this. I believe that each of you hopefully has brought something that represents your grief or your loss in the world. I can just show you very briefly, I've brought a shell, and that this will be my bringing to the cairn of mourning. So if you can, what will happen is that we are going to go into breakout rooms of, I think it's probably going to be about 4 or maybe 5 people each. And you will have 2 minutes each to show other people in your breakout room your object, or if there's nothing that you've brought, tell them about something that touches you deeply, about something that's being lost or being taken or being destroyed in the world, and just speak for 2 minutes what the object is, how it touches you, what it brings up. And then there will be a prompt to say, right, you've had 2 minutes, move to the next person. So please, without going on further, move at that 2-minute break to the next person so everybody gets a chance to share. Right at the beginning of the session, just say your name. The four or five of you tell each other what your name is. So, great thanks to all beings. We know that some of you are going. We know that things are being lost in our world too fast. This is our chance to name them, to celebrate their lives and to grieve their loss. having spoken our grief about what's being lost, what's coming up for us, we thank each other, we thank all beings. Agatha for all threatened beings, written by Gary Snyder. Ah, power that swells us together, grant us bliss. Grant us the great release. Unto all beings vanishing, wounded, in trouble on the earth, we pass on this love. May their numbers increase. Gary Snyder, the poet laureate of Deep Ecology, he's been called. Thoroughly recommend looking for some of his poetry. John and I find it very inspiring. So John is going to just reflect a little bit on composting our grief as well.
I think you've said it, Pat. I think just that metaphor of composting our grief, allowing it to turn into the new growth coming up in the future.
And I thoroughly recommend Francis Weller and the 5 Gates of Grief, if you go and look that up on the internet. He talks about, it's cellist Glendenning, who was very involved in the earlier days, or maybe still is, with the work that Reconnects, and she talks about earth grief, about honouring and letting ourselves just know earth grief. So in this process, I think Shah's just going to lead a debrief, and then we'll reflect where we are in the spiral.
Yeah, thank you, Pat and John. And one of the beauties of the can of mourning is that you also don't need to have a group of people to do it. This is a practice that I've been doing for the last few years, as a solo practice. And so there's a place that I choose where I have my daily walk, and that I'm open to what I'm grieving or what is alive that's being lost. And then I allow nature to present something from nature, and then I pick that up, and then I have a particular place where I always kind of go to, and then I put that item there that acknowledges what's being lost and grieving. And that daily practice of grief keeps me connected with myself and with others, and it also activates and energizes a certain place that I go back to regularly and connect to. So yes, I offered that also as a solo practice to acknowledge our grief and our mourning. And I'm just wondering if there is maybe one person who experienced, just in this ritual that we just did together, a reflection of how it touched you, and is willing to maybe just, say a couple of sentences, what they're taking away from being part of this ritual here just now. And if we don't have anyone that wants to share anything, that's fine. But if there's anyone that does want to, if you just raise your electronic hand. Yes, great. Thank you, Wendy.
Oh, wow. Are you talking about me?
I'm talking about you. Yep. And if you wanted to put your camera on,
fine. It's an honor. This is such a huge honor to be here with all of you, and it's such a gift. And I found the book Thinking Like a Mountain when I was in 1990, and it's been deeply part of my life ever since. So to be with you all today, and then all the people you're naming have been such an important part of my life. But the breakout room was so sweet between me, who started this work back then, and then someone else who grew up with you, John, for her whole life, and then someone else in our group who this is her very first time. And that was a gift also. And I just, telling stories for me with each other instead of just to myself or just in this way brings up emotions and in a way that I can't feel by myself. And so just thank you for today. Such a gift. And it's such an honor to still be in this work with all of you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Wendy, for your sharing. Just taking a breath and a pause and taking all in that we've experienced to this point. And as we're moving in our spiral from honouring our pain in the world to now seeing with new and ancient eyes and hearing from John and Pat about what's emerging for them.
I'd like to just in this segue bring Joanna back and a voice of Joanna before John, you and I look at also what's emerging, because Joanna way back in 1988 wrote about deep ecology. And if I can just read you briefly about it, because it is about the shift, the seeing with new eyes. Can we open our way of being, our identity, to being large, being the larger life, and experiencing ourselves not as the small ego-based life, but a larger life. So Joanna wrote, "A new paradigm is emerging in our time. Through this lens, we see reality so structured that all life forms affect and sustain each other in a web of radical interdependence. This organic interconnectedness is what we call our deep ecology. It can shift the way we perceive ourselves and each other, replacing isolation and fear with a living sense of our deep mutuality. It can broaden our sense of self and self-interest, uncovering our wider identity with the living planet itself, revealing the dependent co-arising of systems. It helps us see levers for change in the institutionalized forms of fear and greed that are destroying our world. It shows us the scope of our freedom to act on behalf of all beings. This is the purpose of our work together." So I find that really powerful. So really going on from what Joanna wrote in 1988, it's still emerging for me is what is my sense of identity in the world and in my actions, and that informs my way of being and informs my actions. I absolutely feel like my independent, isolated self is withering, withered through this work, withering to meet the times. And the sense of identity has to be embedded. It is part not only of all of us here, but of our families, of the people around us, the community, the land around us, the country, the place that's wider, going into the oceans, going into the earth, and then the wider identity that it is our planetary system, our solar system, going right into the Milky Way, going back and back and out and out. And I love that this identity is nothing new. I've found a Chinese poet from the 1000s who was writing exactly about this. So it's just awakening, it's coming back to who we are. I think the biggest shift that's invoking this and going to force us into a shift away from the ego-based self, I think it's happening, and it's called global warming, climate change. And these slides are really powerful to me, because if you want to just look at where the graph lines are going up and up, the steepness of those lines, that's where we are, that's where we are. And that things are happening perhaps faster than we can respond to. And I think that's the balancing act we're in, staying awake to what's happening, looking at what's happening on the smaller local community level while keeping our eye on the big picture and responding to the bigger level. So we are deep time. We are beings of deep time. And you can see that, you know, we are so in the moment of such vast change, mass extinction, fires, flooding. Again, we need to be part of the preparedness within our communities. I think this is part of our identity, to be able to anticipate and prepare. And I think, as Arne Naess was saying, what are we doing? And how are we organising ourselves to do this? So a little bit of what I've been doing through the Reseed Centre, the Permaculture Centre locally, is studying sociocracy, which is an organisational structure that isn't hierarchical, it's circular. It's looking at how we draw on our strengths and our passions to be able to meet the changes. So bigger picture, this slide absolutely slammed into me a little while ago. That is frozen ice that those dogs and those people would normally be going across in their hunting. And that this is what's happened with the Arctic warming, and the Arctic and the Antarctic are warming faster than any other part of the planet. So we are dealing with rapid change, and I think we have to be part of pulling together in small groups and in larger groups to know what to do. I don't think any one of us can know what to do on our own. There's a book by a guy called Clive Hamilton, who's an Australian, called Living Hot, and he's been giving lectures all over the place, writing about it, that what happens is that when he points out that this is what's happening, this is happening, it's not a speculation of change, this is happening, he finds that people start to get a sense of more empowerment by facing it, by naming it, and being ready. He says they go away and saying, right, what can we do? Roll up our sleeves, what can we do? This was also part of deeply affecting me as well. I went to Berlin on Earth Day 3 years ago. And if we could just roll through these slides, but these were the kids, and there were kids who were really small, looking at their lives and the world ahead and asking that we do something about it. Don't wreck our future, we must protect Mother Earth. And coming together, can you see the way that there is actually an enormous coming together as movement, not just individuals, not just as small groups, that we can get out and we can, if we join in some of these larger rallies, some of these larger happenings, we can feel the power of our collective coming together. We can feel the energy of what's emerging through the passion of a lot of these younger people. And I love that there's humour in there as well. And that, you know, there's some sense that by being there in our thousands or our tens of thousands, we're not just lying down and taking it, and that we are part of the evolution of an eco-identity and culture. Yeah, and I think that's an amazing time to do it. Some of what we've been talking about here in Tasmania within Deep Ecology is just to start lots more listening to each other and sharing, and even firesides. We're looking at that on the Deep Ecology website that is a resource for the whole world. John and Tenzin and people have been developing the website to be the storehouse of stories and of exercises of places. So if you're interested, please go to Deep Ecology. I'll just finish on something that Shah just sent. She's talked about two things. Shah's talked about the expanding spiral within the conversation of the work that reconnects. And I think that here in Tasmania, we're doing that expanding spiral. We're working in with, for instance, the Australian Environmental Law Association, Earth Jurisprudence, Wild Law. We're working in with Permaculture Education Institute. We're working with other allied friends and communities to co-share skills, co-share knowledge, co-share resources. A woman who was very influential in the early days also of this work was Starhawk, and she's publishing a book online on Substack, so that she publishes a chapter at a time, and she's talking about how do we grow welcoming community, not divisive community. How do we, as Arne again was saying, work or offer help to those that we think are causing the problems, or to our opponents? So how do we grow a welcoming community? And some of that is reflective in writing and in small groups as well. So that's also what's alive for me. John and I are working on the audiobook version of Thinking Like a Mountain, and that should come out and be available to everyone soon. So over to you, John.
Thanks, Pat. I'd like to start my reflections on what's emerging for me with another short clip of Joanna, if you could.
The living earth, if you take a sense of identity, identified with it, can work through you so that you don't see it. It's not my power. It's not my smarts. It's not my cleverness or my devotion. It's because it comes from the living earth. You become an agent of something much vaster if you trust. So this is so incredible. And this came to me in my mid-40s, I guess, when I encountered a deep ecologist, rainforest activist in Australia named John Seed. He's still alive, but he went, then the rest of us caught it from him, because he was defending the rainforest from illegal logging, and he was able to stand there and facing the police and the illegal loggers, knowing, he said, suddenly it changed his sense of who he was. He was the rainforest defending itself. Now, once you have that shift in identity, that you are being, that this larger identity acts through you, because the earth needs human hands. The earth needs human voices. And we're in a time when it's humans. I can talk to other humans. We're the ones who are acting like idiots.
So this the shift in identity, which moves us from our merely social identity to our ecological identity, to me, that seems to be the key. And the piece of it that I've been looking at recently is that as uplifting as it is to spend a weekend together and to participate in the kind of experiential processes, what Arne Naess called community therapies to heal the illusion of separation. These are synchronous in some ways with the kinds of ceremonies that all Indigenous peoples throughout time practiced regularly throughout the year, the entire community coming together to drop the day-to-day and to immerse ourselves in that larger picture, to remember all our relations, to remember the living earth. And so I've been looking at the possibility of recreating that kind of a culture rather than a workshop with a facilitator that people pay in order to, re-experience this kind of a thing. We've started in Melbourne having what we call deepening weekends, which are very similar to the workshops. We use the spiral of the work that reconnects. We use the same kind of processes, but these weekends are by invitation. The invitation goes out to all alumni of deep ecology workshops, people who have done these workshops at least once, and they're free. And so we're trying to create a culture where these things are just available on a regular basis, and it's not the kind of the thing that you have to pay for any longer. And we've done 2 of these, and the 3rd one is coming up in September, and I'm very excited by that. The other thing that's exciting me is an increasing appreciation for the importance of feelings. These feelings, which were such a huge part of our intelligence, that when we look back upon our pre-human ancestors for thousands of millions of years, every single one of our ancestors was intelligent enough to reach the age of reproducing itself before it was consumed, without exception. And this intelligence preceded the growth of this bulge above our nose and our ability to use cognition to think our way through the world. What we call feelings is what remains in us of this ancient intelligence that allowed our ancestors to make good decisions, to understand what was safe and what was dangerous. And so more and more I feel that the honouring our pain for the world, that it's what I learned from Joanna, what she used to call despair and empowerment, that this is the key to us being able to move forward in an intelligent way into our future as human beings, is to recapture the intelligence of those feelings, to welcome those feelings back into our lives.
And there is a question that's just arrived at the perfect timing, and I think it's a great question, actually. Nalia has shared it. She asks and says, it seems that activism, like the video we saw at the beginning, has become less commonplace. Do you feel, or do you also feel that is so? And if so, why do you think that is? And how can we enliven peaceful protest as a tool for the people's expression and a catalyst for change in this present moment where everyone is too busy, too tired, and too overwhelmed? And I think it's a great question, Nalia, because I was just recently listening to the podcast that I put into the chat around the Green and Common, and that was like a protest that went for up to 20 years, and it also included at its height of 30,000 people marching, as kind of Pat mentioned. So, and I kind of thought to myself, wow, like to actually get, how do you kind of, have that kind of activism that is a catalyst that brings people together when it does seem like people are too busy or too tired. So yeah, it'd be good to hear the reflections, John and or Pat. And I know, John, you've been doing stuff with Rising Tide and recently did an amazing protest on the waters of Newcastle, I think it was.
Well, perhaps I'll mention that and say that I do feel that in Australia there is a resurgence of activism. I certainly feel it in me. And last November, I was part of a blockade of kayaks that blocked the port of Newcastle, the world's largest coal port, responsible for exporting 1% of the world's greenhouse gases in the form of coal to different parts of the world. And I was one of 109 people that were arrested in that blockade, the first time I've been arrested in 25 years, and more than 3,000 people participated, and we're working to see if we can make it 10,000 people this coming November. What about you, Pat?
Well, a couple of things come up for me is that possibly COVID caused a lot of stuff online, and I'm constantly writing letters to people, politicians all over the place, or signing petitions. So the mass movement is happening, but kind of unseen, and you don't get that camaraderie that happens when you're on a march, like I was showing in the Earth Day march. There are different actions. I mean, I just named Bob Brown Foundation here in Tasmania. constant rolling direct actions, whether it's to do with the Tarkine and logging of native forest, or the damage the salmon farms are causing, or particularly another one that's really important, one that Sea Shepherd and other people at Greenpeace share as well, is krill, the farming of krill. But these are sort of actions where we put our money into the organisations to do that for us. Although Bob Brown is constantly asking people to come and join in direct protest actions. I just think, for me, it's about coming back to community and what can we do locally, which is actually kind of scarier because we're accountable to the people who are around us. You know, I was, thinking about if the forests are being logged and only a handful of people are trying to stop it and witness it, can the trees come into town? Can we get some kids and whoever feels strongly to, you know, just be creative and just do even little stuff where we actually have fun, where we actually love making something creative. And if some trees are kind of hanging around in the middle of the CBD, the trees talk to people, can talk to people. I talked to someone yesterday who's in a climate choir. Oh no, it was on our Deep Ecology call, wasn't it? And she was saying how she's been with a group of people going straight into the middle of Melbourne, and they're singing really familiar songs, but they've taken the words to be talking about stop coal mining. I can't sing the song, but it was really clever. So there's different ways that I think if we can find a little group of people and do stuff locally, that is also, it's real, it's grounded. And that to me, that's what speaks to me.
Thank you, Pat and John.
And I see Indigenous activism is strong and growing, and that's being supported here as well in this island by the libraries to bring Indigenous people, the original people, to come and meet people in the library and tell their stories. So storytelling is another way that's powerful. Yeah, Ecopella, sing songs for the earth. I see that too. Great. So, John, the importance of gratitude. You were going to offer something around Thomas Berry and the universe wrap.
Thanks. Yeah, so one of my mentors and one of the people who we honour in the workshops is the late Thomas Berry, who was a famous Catholic theologian who late in his life discovered that he had become a geologian. His attention turned from the concept of God that he'd grown up with to the earth itself as the source of everything. And he spoke about the importance of creation myths, but he called for the poets and artists and musicians and mystics to tell the story of the universe, the story that's revealed to us by empiricism, the cosmology, the evolution of life on Earth, but to tell it in a way that inspires the awe and wonder that a creation myth deserves. And so I'd like my last contribution today to be one of the poets that responded to Thomas was Drew Dellinger, at that time a young rapper from Prescott, Arizona, and this is Drew Dellinger's Universe Jam. The flame has lit up the world from within. All things, individually and collectively, are interpenetrated and flooded by it. You who mould the manifolds to breathe your life into it, I pray to you. The first verse of the universe pours forth like a sea of mystery. Out of the void, unmanifest silence. Space-time comes into existence, unseen, shaping, swirling, unfurling. Hydrogen, helium, divine is revealed within galactic whirlpools. As energy flows in, a star collapses, supernova explosion, a cloud of cosmic debris, drawn together by gravity, by the mystery of attraction, primordial bonding, universe action, stardust swirling, forming gases, organizing and forming masses. See the sun as the one that spun the 9 others, give birth to Mother Earth and her sisters and brothers. Mercury, Venus, Mars and Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, every one is the sun. The sun is the one, everyone. Everybody better wake up. And the earth gave birth to continents and oceans, shaping and shaking in waves of emotion, crashes of lightning, bombarding and striking, exposing the globe as it glows like a strobe, and setting the stage for the first cell of life. So simple, so basic, so primal that I place it at the top of the chain from which all life sprang. More forms adorn the earth as they bring diversity dispersing the song of creation. Ring in the dawn, sing along in celebration. I just want to celebrate life. I just want to celebrate Earth. I just want to celebrate the cosmos. I just want to celebrate. The sea comes alive, starts to thrive with new life forms. Storms swept the planet, plants crept on granite enchanted by the sun's solar power. The earth gave birth to green leaves and flowers. Lava flows, mountains rose, tropical islands, forests and meadows, fed by the freshwater streams, the veins, heavenly rain strained back to the sea. The fish are set free as they swim onto sand. Fins turn to limbs and they limp onto land. Amphibians, reptiles, new styles of creature, seeing through new being the range of her features. The earth, your mother, gave birth to eyesight. Looking within as she spins in the sunlight, on to the dawn, to the day of the dinosaur. Pterodactyl soars, Tyrannosaurus rex, towering, devouring. So who's up next? Mammals and primates, all life interrelated, divinely created. So don't you think it's time we celebrate it? I just want to celebrate life. I just want to celebrate Earth. I just want to celebrate the cosmos. I just want to celebrate. Thank you, Drew Dellinger.
Thank you, John. And I met Drew Dillinger some years ago at Schumacher College, and he thanks us for this work and for Joanna's work, and said it's been a deep inspiration to him. So the circular economy, the poem comes back to us. So I find poetry can speak in a way that I can't when I'm talking. Poems are like spoken through me and speak through us. So this is a short poem called The Body is a Watershed by Jordan Jones, an American poet. I am only a temporary geology of bones, water sands to fluid curves, speeding its return to itself and the expanding acres of krill. Water moves through me and falls away, as charged with minerals as I am, as salty as polar. Oxygen carves rivulets through my flesh and feeds the soil of each drinking cell. Water wheels back into the air from whoever I am, to fish, fowl, protozoan, person. How joyous to be a mortal house of rushing water, to be at the center all my life of the give and take of water and clay, of the give and take of water and clay. Thank you, Jordan. Her collection's called The Wheel. And lastly, going back to a Chinese poet in the 700s called Li Bai. Zazen on Ching Ting Mountain. The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. Until only the mountain remains. Thank you, everybody, and wishing you well in your work, on your journey, wherever you are in the world, and for the voices that will speak through you.
Just great pleasure to have shared this time with all of you.
So if you all want to unmute and offer each other a farewell, thank you all so much. Thank you, Pat and John and Shar, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. It was amazing. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. To learn more about the Work That Reconnects Network's webinars and Conversation Cafe program, please visit our website at workthatreconnects.org. We welcome you to become a community member of the Work That Reconnects. Visit us at workthatreconnects.org. Become a member for more information.